Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm recording this on August 11th. There's going to be a series of videos that I do, and we're going to be learning together on this. Some of the people that watch my channel have done service, some have not, many have not. But the ones that do, if you have some insight in your service in either of the branches that we cover, uh, Marines, Air Force, Navy, Army, even Space Force, um, uh, please interject, send me an email about your insight or even comments in the video. That's important. We're all trying to get up to a certain level of knowledge so we get a better understanding of what has happened geopolitically. Now we know that there are three major regions of the world that are really hotbeds that I've been concerned about. That's the Ukraine war with Russia, what's going on in the Middle East, and the bigger issue that is starting to come to the fore with China in the Pacific. I've been saying this since 2020. All right, the crisis that we went through in 2020 is leading us towards a larger world conflict with China. All right. Then you have this whole issue with the Middle East, and the perspective I have is that there's a lot of metaphysical aspects to it, but we need to understand on this plane what the military capabilities are for the enemy and for the United States, and where do we as the United States fall short, or where do we dominate? Because we don't dominate in all categories. So this is, for many people that are watching, this is going to be a learning process. For ones that have been in the service, you're going to be much more knowledgeable about what we're going to be talking about in the next several videos. In other areas, you may not be, because that wasn't where your wheelhouse was. But it's the whole point here is to get to a certain higher level of understanding about military capability, military strategy. What are some of the weaknesses? What are some of our strengths are? So we have a better, when we see these news events that are taking place, or we hear some sort of announcement that certain types of hardware is being sent to Taiwan or Ukraine or whatever, we fully understand what this means. All right. Because the mainstream media, it's too basic. It's way too basic. It's a data point, but it's too basic, and there's a lot more layers of understanding that we have to peel back to really understand what's going on. All right. So it's going to be a lesson learned. There's going to be a lot of information that is going to be provided in these next several videos, and we're going to learn together. And again, if you are a service member, veteran, whatever, and you have some input in this, please put it in the comments or send me an email, and I'll absorb that. So again, this is a lessons learned. It dovetails into the crisis that we went through. All right. Like I said, there's certain levels of capability that the United States and our adversaries are developing and have developed and have utilized that are of unconventional means. That's chemical, that's biological, that's radiological. We're moving into a drone and artificial intelligence realm in terms of strategy and implementation on the battlefield. So you couple this AI, drone warfare, chemical, biological, unconventional warfares, and we're moving fast, very fast into a point of activity that would be considered a world war. All right, how that all ends up, because we had, during the 80s, we had the idea, when I was a kid, the idea was World War III is nuclear. Well, not necessarily. And I think that everything is playing out to kind of show that, but tactical nukes could go off, and there's lots of other problems with that. I did a video previously about this issue, and some of the lessons learned, some of the worries that we might have with certain types of strategies with nuclear weapons, the loss of some of the key strategists over time. We're a generation, we've lost the anchors, what I call the anchors for this unconventional warfare. Those anchors have passed away. So we're dealing with a new generation of thinking, strategy of the use of nuclear weapons. So, and that might be dangerous, but there's lots of capabilities that we have. So it's really important to kind of get up to speed. The types of weaponry that we have, the power imbalance that may be biased for us, or we may be weak in other categories. It's really important to understand. And as I've been kind of getting myself educated on this concept of what's the United States capability, I'm starting to see that there are a lot of gaps. Now, is that misinformation? For tactical reasons, for strategic reasons? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe people that are in the armed services will say, it's not that bad or it's worse. I don't know. But the point here is that most of the American population does not know what's going on, and it's time to raise the bar. You have to get much more educated on this subject matter and go way beyond the MSNBC, the CNN, and the Fox News sound bites, because it's a lot more complicated, and it's a lot more, and it has a lot more idiosyncrasies during different regions of the world and different weapon systems that are being used. So with that said, please subscribe to my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. I have Patreon. If you want to be a subscriber to Patreon, that helps to support my work and keep the videos for free. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right. On the homepage, you can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. All the links are in the description. So just click the links and sign up for the different channels and be a paid member to Patreon and donate if you can to help support my work. I also have for many years I've been talking about this protocol that I've been doing on how to improve your immune system, how to improve your health, how to slow down the aging process, and the importance of changing of lifestyle to be able to improve longevity and anti-aging and all this stuff. So it's something I do it every day, and you just follow what I've been saying and you'll see similar results. For example, on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, I have structural nanosilver liquids. All right, this is a ppm 30. So parts per million, 30. You just take a teaspoon of this a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle with it, swallow it. And what this does is it neutralizes pathogens, improves your oral hygiene, and protects your mucosal barrier for your epithelium. I have max 35 and max 14, which is 35 ppms and 14 ppms. Same thing, just take a teaspoon of it a day, swish in your mouth, gargle, swallow. If you're not feeling well because of the cold season or whatever, take a tablespoon or 2 a day and do the same thing. The whole idea is to neutralize pathogens and maintain that mucosal barrier. For the ones that purchase the liquid and haven't done so, please get the applicator set that's on my store. You get a spritzer, a dropper, and a nasal spray. You can put the liquid in the little containers here, put it in your bag. That way you're taking it with you to work or whatever. The spritzer can also, you can spray surfaces with it or back of your throat. Or you can use the dropper, put it in your mouth, or then nasal spray, obviously, would be the nasal cavity. So get the liquid from my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And lastly, I have structural nano silver soaps. This one's the charcoal tea tree, but I also have 4 other varieties. So please go to my store, get a couple bars for your household. It's a very high quality structural nano silver soap. It helps neutralize pathogens. And it's way better than, let's say, Dove or some of the other soaps that you may use for body washing. So this is a great soap. Get a couple bars for your household. That way you're supporting my work and you're also improving your health. With that said, I want to start with this deep dive in the Chinese Navy.
Hamlet, Editor-in-Chief of Proceedings at the U.S. Naval Institute. Today is Thursday, August 18th, 2022. We're going to be talking a lot about the Chinese Navy, what China's up to in the Western Pacific today. This episode is brought to you by Raytheon Missiles and Defense. The SPY-6 family of radars is not just revolutionary, it's across the fleet, /SPY-6. Just a reminder, sponsored with content.
20, 180. That's how many clients I'm going to get you, and that's how many days it's going to take me to do it. And I will do it on a pay on results basis, and I will guarantee
that you started sounding the alarm about China and the Chinese Navy at least 5 years before anyone else. And that was about 15 years ago. And you were 100% right about the trends and the direction where China was headed. I want to point out that in late July, Jim and I had the pleasure of doing a combined presentation at the Cambridge Security Initiative Conference at Cambridge University in England. Jim talked about the Chinese Navy, and I talked about the Naval Institute's American Sea Power Project and trends in the U.S. Navy. Jim's presentation on the PLA Navy was so well done and entirely based on unclassified sources that I thought we have to get him on the podcast to give this presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim now to give that presentation, and then we'll take some audience questions at the end.
Well, thanks a lot, Bill. And I'm going to try to get through these slides rapidly as I can so we can have that question and answer. I believe the evidence will show that China is on a quest to restore themselves to great power status, and they've actually achieved the levels that give them an ability to do that. And largely, it's been based upon maritime power. This slide here, I didn't include, obviously, in our presentations in Cambridge because it hadn't happened yet. But what you see there is a picture of the ballistic missile shots from mainland China against Taiwan. And you'll see 6 closure areas that bracket Taiwan from the east, the north, the south, and the west in the Taiwan Strait. And depending on who you listen to, Taiwan Ministry of Defense says there was 11 missile shot. Japanese Ministry of Defense says there was 9 missile shot. But regardless, 9 to 11 ballistic missiles were fired into these closure areas. Up to 4 of them went across Taiwan, flew over Taiwan, which is really hard to think about in terms of the relationship that China and Taiwan have had, and the understanding that the United States government has had about kind of keeping the status quo and seeking peaceful resolutions. So I just showed a slide to kind of get across that this is really a demonstration of the briefing that I gave in Cambridge, and I've been giving for the last 7 years since I've been retired, to say that this is the path that China's headed on. And the next slide here is a slide from 2012, and this was taken by an Australian naval officer on board a Chinese frigate, PLA Navy frigate, that was in Sydney Harbor in June of 2012. And this frigate from the PLA Navy had come from the Gulf of Aden, where it had been part of one of the anti-piracy or naval escort task forces that China has been sending out there since December of 2008. They're now in their 41st task force. But this ship had come from China, transited all the way out to the Gulf of Aden, had done 3.5 months on patrol, and then went down to Sydney with other ships of their task force and had a port call. And an astute Royal Australian Navy officer took this picture. And what you see is mainland China with the dragon's head coming out from the mainland of China with these 3 arrows or vectors that are coming out, one into the South China Sea, one into the Sea of Japan, up in the Arctic, and then another one down, north of Taiwan, but essentially down into the South Pacific. And I put that out there because in today's, a lot of people follow what's going on in China, and there's a school of thought that says that Xi Jinping's the real problem, the current general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, and that if we had, somebody different in charge, things may not be so bad. But it's really important to see that this is a picture from June of 2012, before Xi was put into power at the Communist Party plenum that occurred in October of 2012. And you have to realize that that picture was taken and produced and then posted on the bulkhead of the PLA Navy frigate, probably starting as back as early as 2010. So my point of showing this slide is to say that China is the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party since Mao Zedong have all been marching towards an end state. And Xi has told us what the end state is. It's called the Great Rejuvenation of China. But it's based upon this kind of dynastic thinking in China that's called Tin Sha, or all under heaven. That the world, everything that happens on the earth, it comes through China and connects with heaven. And that's kind of where the mindset is of the Chinese Communist Party. Not so much in Buddhist terms or that kind of terminology, but this idea that they need to be restored to their rightful place in history as the leaders of and the arbiters of everything that happens on the globe. That's what they want to have, and that's what they're marching towards. And this picture really is emblematic of that. And to get to that achievement of that great rejuvenation and great restoration of territory, it's based upon maritime power. And so there you have, I think this is a picture from 2019, where you have over 45 PLA Navy warships, aircraft carriers, supply ships, big deck amphibs, their latest destroyers and whatnot, and nuclear submarines, and the Jin-class SSBN were all out in display in the South China Sea, and was one of the biggest demonstrations of naval power by any nation in the South China Sea since probably the Vietnam War. And it was China that did it. And you can see there that quote at the bottom where Xi said in 2013, right after he'd taken power and publicly had been announced as the new leader of China, that he says that we're going to depend upon the ocean to make ourselves a maritime power. And there's other quotes where he talks about it as a great nation, we have to be a maritime power. So he's the first kind of paramount leader. You had Mao, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and now Xi Jinping, the 5 paramount leaders of the People's Republic of China since 1 October 1949. And he's really the first one that's actually been such a strong proponent of maritime power. And he's backed up these rhetoric with real actions. And one of the ways they back it up is through what they spend their money on. And what you see here is just up through 2021 from the Chinese own website, Global Times, but it's reported in other places. But it's the amount of money that they spend on their defense. And you can see that each year it's gone up. And people talk about how much money's spent, and they like to focus on just the dollar amount. And everybody says, well, the United States spends more than China. But there's a lot of other variables that go into calculating what really matters. But the point of this slide is simply to say that China has increased the spending on the PLA and made it a top priority. I'll give just one example. In 2020, each year they have a National People's Congress in March of each year, and the state government and the party come together and they announce, here's what our economic situation is, and here's what we think our GDP will be for the year, gross domestic product, and they always talk about their military spending. And in 2020, for the first time in 28 years, the People's Republic of China and the Communist Party could not tell the world and the people of China what they thought their gross domestic product would be. They said, we don't know because of COVID. And they delayed their party congress or People's Congress until May. And even by delaying it 2 months and curtailing it by a week, they still didn't have enough information and confidence to give a GDP estimate. But they were able to tell the assembly there, the thousands of people that come for this assembly and the world, the press, that they would grow their military by 6.6%. It's kind of strange. 2021 is kind of similar. They said, we really can't give you an exact GDP, but we think it'll be something around 6%. But we know we will spend 6.8% increase on our defense spending. And the year before, I should have said 6.6% increase on the previous year. So each year they've been able to say that we spend more each year on the PLA than we have in previous years. Now the rate of that increase may differ, but the point is they prioritize where their money goes, and it goes to the PLA. And we should recognize that, especially when we talk about things like foreign direct investment from funds like TSP that many of us on this podcast probably pay into. So what does that mean? Well, if you go back to 2000, basically the first year, it's just a good starting point. But in 2000, China's Navy and its military was very weak. It was what we would consider a brown water Navy. They never patrolled more than 20 or 30 miles off their coast. They had old platforms, that some from the World War II era. They had old Soviet types of submarines, and they didn't have a large amount. They were mainly a land power, and their land power was the size of their military, the vast numbers of people that they had in the PLA, over 2 million, closer to 3 million. So if you advance 20 years, you can see that the Chinese, with that spending that has gone on during that, what we call their military modernization period of 2 decades, they were able to not only acquire new 4th and 5th generation platforms, but they were able to also begin operating outside the first island chain into the Philippine Sea, and then even into the Indian Ocean. And as we saw up until the COVID virus impact, they were operating in the Mediterranean, conducting exercise with the Russians, operating in the Baltic. In 2019, I happened to be fortunate enough to trick my way onto a PLA Navy frigate in Kiel, Germany. And what I saw there really impressed me. I had been on Chinese ships throughout that 20-year period, and what I saw in Kiel, Germany in December or in the summer of 2019, or the fall of 2020.
And I was saying in early 2020 that the crisis that was happening was going to lead to a larger conflict in Asia. And that we were going to have, this concept that I called the Bio-Patriot Act. And it wasn't going to be called the Bio-Patriot Act, but it was the concept of all these different things that were happening domestically in the United States, in terms of loss of constitutional freedoms, increased power by the national security state, social scoring, digital currencies, all this kind of stuff, all right? And moving towards more of a war footing. So while the world was managing itself through the crisis of 2020, 2021, 2022, China was turning from a brown water Navy to a blue water Navy, and testing the waters on how strategically they'd be able to control those first and second island chains. Meanwhile, what was in the news? Naval fleet was somewhat incapacitated because of the crisis. So that's why I'm saying that what we went through in 2020 was a pinch point that led to further activity that's starting to rear its head in 2025. All right. So, keep that in mind. Now, this is just conventional. We're not talking about unconventional means, but unconventional means have also been developed in the same time period.
Was a ship that looked like a U.S. Navy frigate that I would have seen when I joined the Navy in 1986. These were people that had been at sea for 4 or 5 months. The ship was in great shape. The sailors were motivated. They had not just ship's company, they had staff there like a Desron, and they had their own, it was a well-functioning ship, and they seemed to be very organized and motivated to do what they were doing. And they were in Kiel, Germany. And so that's how far they've come in a 20-year period. And just now, projecting out some, where are they headed? This is a chart that just came out of a study from the Hudson Institute. And what you see there is normally we were talking about China inside that first island chain from Japan to the Yukus, and maybe out to the second island chain. But what we're starting to realize now is that China is approaching and going to be approaching the third island chain, which is out to Hawaii. And given some of the combat capabilities that they have with their naval forces and their naval air forces, they're going to be able to reach Hawaii. And that maybe they already are in Hawaii, and we just don't have access to some of the classified information.
All right, so I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this chart. So, all right, so we're talking. So they have these different types. Okay, type 1, type 2, type 3. Okay, so type 2 is a aircraft carrier, and my understanding is that aircraft carrier is Shandong aircraft carrier, and it has J-15s. So now my understanding is J-15s are China's air fighters. Let me just double check that. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, so the J-15s are kind of like an F-15 or an F-16, right? All right, so their aircraft carrier is carrying these J-15s, and their strike radius is 475 nautical miles. Now, that's on the west side of the Philippines. Now, on the east side of the Philippines is their cruiser class, and they have their airplanes on there, or their what's YJ? I think that's an airplane, but they have a 200 nautical mile range. So YJ 18A. Oh, it's a missile. It's a missile. It's Eagle Strike designation. Okay, it's a missile capability. All right. So on the cruiser, they have these YJ 18As. And the YJ 18As are missiles. And they're air, okay. All right, they're ASMs. Okay, this is what is called an ASM. And they have a range of 200 nautical miles. All right, so now that's on the east side of the Philippines. Then they have an aircraft that is an HCK, which has a combat radius of 1,900 nautical miles. H6K. What is that? That's a bomber. Okay, so that's a bomber. All right, so they have a H6K bomber that has 1,900 nautical miles. Right, so the point that he's making is that the carrier group, the type 2 carrier group, Shandong, that's going to be able to control the strait that's around Southeast Asia, west side of the Philippines, and in towards Taiwan. So they can control that with that carrier group. The cruiser missile range can control the east side of the Philippines. Now, when they do that, then their Navy is pushed out, they're controlling that first island chain, and then with their H6Ks, they can get to the very edge, right just before Hawaii. Okay, then they have another type, a type 93 class, which is their subs. And they also carry ASMs at 200 nautical range with the YJ-18As. And that is problematic because one, they're below the surface, and two, they're controlling around Hawaii. So you can see why it's so important that the United States shows projection of power inside the first island chain and make sure that there is an understanding that projection of power by China is not allowed. But unfortunately, policymakers, going all the way back to the Obama administration, has been easy on China in these straits and allowed for China to be able to project power beyond the first island chains. This is why I said the first island chains are so important. I said this in 2020, and how COVID was how the crisis in COVID was related to the island chains. The war in the Pacific is tied to COVID. I can't make that more clear. And people need to pay attention to this, because this is leading to a larger conflict where the hegemonic power of the United States is going to be checked, and that we are indebted and not prepared financially or probably even militarily to be able to fight this. And that's why I sense that this is extreme. What is going on is extremely important, and we need to pay attention to this. Then there's another. So there's another weapon system that they have, which is called the CJ 200, and it's an ALCM. That's 1,000 nautical miles. What is that? CJ 20. Long range cruise missile. All right, so it's important to understand on how they're projecting power on the first island chains, and what missile systems and what naval apparatus they're using to project that power. All right, before we go further into the conversation, I got to plug for the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Please go to my store. Link is in the description, and get the products that I offer. I have structural nanosilver gel in 2 types. I have it in the tube form, and I have it also in the dispenser form. You use it the same way. It's a dual purpose product. You put it on your hands, it'll stay active for 5 hours. It'll neutralize pathogens. Put it around your mouth, around your nose, around your eyes, around your ears. You can't do that with Perel. This is way better than Perel. Perel cracks your skin. This actually heals your skin and neutralizes pathogens. In addition, you can put it on a wound. It'll help to heal the wound, an abrasion, or a minor burn. It'll speed up the healing by about 30%. And you have acne, you can put it on your acne to help heal that. It's also an everyday skincare. So, for example, if for a guy you shave, you use the gel on your face right after you shave, and you'll feel a cooling sensation and a healing sensation. Females, if you're shaving, at your legs, apply the gel after you shave, and you'll notice that your legs don't have the razor burn, and that cool, you'll have a cool sensation on the skin, and it'll help heal the skin. So it can be used as an aftershave. In addition, you can put it on your skin, keep it on your skin. Let's say you apply it at night, and when you wake up, you exfoliate. You'll notice that your skin is clearer, and and smoother and tighter. All right, especially on your face, you'll notice that your skin's tighter. So please go to the store and get the structural nano silver gels.
Strategic trend line. So how did they get there? How did they get such a big navy? Well, one of the ways is they have a large number of platform or shipyards. And you can see in this chart here that the PRC operates 19 major shipyards compared to 7 for the United States. At the end of World War II, I think we had over 22. And just one of their main shipyards, Zhongnandao, which is the shipyard that you're seeing the chart of, which is just outside of Shanghai, that one facility is larger than all 7 of ours. It's, in terms of geographic space, it's 4 times the size of Newport News. And this is just a picture of a part of Zhongnandao in their shipyard there, and you can see the number of platforms that were under construction at the time of this the chart. I think it was in the summer or fall of last year. But what's important to note also is the product of what's coming out. Last year in 2021, as the chart says at the top, China commissioned 22 warships compared to 3 for us. Now, up until 2021, that average, the Chinese have been out producing it at a rate of 4 or 5 to 1 of ours every year for the previous decade. So they're producing a lot of warships, and there's warships of consequence. And you can kind of get a sense here of when this really started to go into high production. It was around the 2011, 2012 timeframe, which is interesting because this is when all the economists in the China Hands community had said that China's defense spending would go down commensurate with their GDP for the first time, dipping below that 10% annual increase.
I mean, this is crazy.
So that soft
So
landing.
right at about 2016, all right. So during the Obama's administration, right when he's leaving, the actual number of vessels decline. They're declining in 2014, about 2013 to about 2015, 2016. All right. And then at that time, the Chinese really ramped up. The Chinese surpassed the number of vessels that we had in 2016 when Trump gets into serving for the presidency. This is part of the reason why Trump kept on saying we need more vessels and more ships to be built. Okay, so he's building, but it takes a while to get there. And there is an increase now when Trump gets into office of more ships. Okay, and at this level, at 22, we had 300. All right, the goal was like 355. All right, we haven't had close to 300 based on this 2022 data going all the way back to 2003. So we've had a declining, we've been basically having a declining fleet in the Navy since 2003. That is unacceptable, totally unacceptable. And what was going on? We were weakening our Navy for the Chinese. So everyone that bought ETFs or, invested in funds that moved money to China, you actually helped build their Navy. Just like the ones that are using AI, you're helping AI to take your job away. Same people that, try to, promote Bitcoin, you're actually ushering in a surveillance technology where a digital currency will track all your transactions. People need to realize that your activities over time especially over a 10 or 20-year period, will lead to negative externalities in terms of your civil liberties and your safety. Case in point, right here. What was going on in 2000? A lot of money from Wall Street was moving into China. Walmart was forcing manufacturing into China. People wanted to buy cheap goods at big box stores. Well, all that activity, as the United States Navy was declining, gave the resources for the Chinese to actually start building up their Navy. Thank you very much for shopping at Walmart. All right, so the United States had a goal of 355 or just under 360. The Chinese, that was the goal for the US. The Chinese surpassed the US goal in about 2019. Just before COVID. Now, do you understand that this was using unconventional warfare to weaken the United States and strengthen China? All right, now, okay, so now with that said, during the Trump administration, there was an uptick in the vessels being built, and that carried on into the Biden administration. But what is interesting is this: back in 2003, now you're talking Bush administration, Bush Jr.'s administration, there was a plan to decline the number of vessels, going from, the plan was 370, and at that time we were at about 300. All right, they wanted it, the plan was 370, but we had only just below 300, and then they radically changed from 370 going all the way down to about 320, and it oscillated. So they always their goal was to keep about a 320 fleet. While China has already, now going into 2019, 2020, is over 360. Right here was the failure point. Now, maybe part of the reason was cutting of funds, the spending of trillions of dollars in the Middle East. We also had Lehman that took place, and with Lehman, that looked like it did a further drop from about 330 down to 310. Do you see that economic viability also translate into hegemonic projection? So indebtedness, because of social programs, for failed policies in the Middle East. You can't have a never-ending war. You get it, go in, you gotta win fast. You can't have a 10-year war, you can't have a 20-year war. You can't afford it. Because what happens is it translates into weakening your military 10 years down the road. And now we're living it right now here. And there was a catalyst point with unconventional means in 2020 that took place. And everyone's saying, oh, it's just a pandemic. No, this is what the real game is, right here.
That we used to hear about in the 2011 timeframe, China's economy started to cool off, and their annual growth of their GDP was under 10% for the first time, and we were told that defense spending would go down. But in terms of product, the product you can see actually went quite up very far. And it wasn't just in numbers of platforms, it was also in tonnage. This chart talks about the tonnage. And basically around 2012, 2014, China started to match us in tonnage. And since 2015, they've outproduced the United States in tonnage of aircraft. and that trend line doesn't seem to be changing, in my opinion. So I've given some assessments. These have been published in the Navy War College Review and other places. I updated my estimate for where I thought the PLA Navy would be in 2030. I've given an estimate in 2015, and I updated it in 2019, and I think they'll have a combined naval force of major combatants that you can see listed there, and submarines, ballistic missile submarines, and nuclear submarines, probably around 560 or so
All right,
vessels.
let me read this chart.
And
Let
that's
me just
really
read this
important.
chart. Okay, so this is the PLA future projection in 2030. All right. This is the new estimate. Aircraft carriers, 6. Cruisers, 16. Destroyers, 45. Frigates, 55. Corvettes, I don't know what those are, 45. Missile patrol craft, 100. Amphibious ships, 75. Mine warships, 50. Major auxiliaries, 60 plus. Total surface combatants, 452 plus. SSNs, 24. SSBNs, 14. SSs, 70. So total submarines are 108. So that's the SS classes, that's submarines. So you have 108 108 submarines, and you have 452 surface ships of different varieties. That's how he gets to the 560. I'll tell you, the United States is way behind here, way behind.
We start talking about where we are as a Navy and where we're at, even if we have finer ships and finer sailors, it becomes numbers game. And they're producing platforms like this, like the Red High class cruiser, the Type 055. They call it a destroyer, we call it a cruiser. 112 VLS tubes that can launch land attack cruise missiles, can launch anti-ship cruise missiles like the YJ-18, that's 300 kilometers, supersonic, sea-scanning, wicked bad missile, and they also have the HHQ-9 surface-to-air missile. So it's a shotgun, and they're using these platforms now. They have 6 commissioned. There's 2 more that are building, or I think are in the process of sea trials. And these platforms are going to be escorting vessels like this, like the Type 075 Uzo class amphibious assault helicopter carrier. This is about a 50,000 ton vessel. The Type 055 is around 12 to 13 tons. And so these are going to start escorting the Type 055 cruisers will escort these and form the basis of the new Marine Corps that Xi Jinping ordered to be put into production, where they increased the number of Marines from 20,000 to 100,000. And they're going to have expeditionary strike groups. They've also acquired their former Chief of Navy, Admiral Wu Shengli, was very, very prescient. He was the kind of the modern day father of their Navy, and many people think so, I do. And he was very cognizant of the one key deficiency that they had beyond other major platforms, but it was in resupply. And so if you go back to when I was on Kitty Hawk and CTF-70, and you watched the Chinese try to refuel a Sovereign destroyer in the East China Sea, I think the first year they tried that was in, I don't know, 03 or 04. And I remember the first year they did it, and they screwed up so bad.
03, 04 was where they had low experience level and a low ship level relative to our ship levels. Remember what I was saying? But in the United States, we started to decline our production.
And they had the Russian, the Sovereign fuel was black oil based and diesel, and it just, they screwed up the decoupling, and there was, you could just, they smeared the entire Sovereignty. It was, you could see it, and the Japanese took pictures of it, and everybody was having a good laugh. And now 20 years later, they're out doing underway replenishment like we do. And they've been practicing it for, since 2008 with the Gulf of Aden deployments. And now they've built this new class of comprehensive resupply ships.
Started practicing in 2008. What happens in 2008? That's Lehman and the financial crisis that we have. See what I'm the point here? There are these points in time you can see that they're accelerating their capability. 2003, 2008, 2019, 2020. We were run by a bunch of dumb idiots.
Again, this is like another 40, 50,000 ton vessel that's there resupplying 2 of their Type 055 cruisers. It's also resupplying their aircraft carriers. And their aircraft carriers have been very operational. We saw them here in August, this exercise. Now, one of them did have a problem, the first one, CV-16 Liaoning. You know, their aircraft carriers did come out and operate in, this is, I think, from the spring of this year, but they were also out a couple of times at the end of last year. So they're very operationally focused, and they're integrating their carriers, even though they may not be as capable of ours. They're not, but they're operating like we do and thinking like we do about having carrier strike groups and expeditionary strike groups. And then here's a picture of the newest one. You've probably seen it, CV-18 Fujian. It's again a conventionally powered carrier, but what it has, and this kind of shocked everybody, is that they say they have 3 electromagnetic aircraft launch system catapults. And so this is a very stark reminder that China has been stealing our technology and skip echelon in the development of their forces. And I think it's worth pointing out, you know, the first 2 were based on the Kuznetsov class, Russian class carriers of about 40, 50,000 tons. This new CV-18 Fujian is 80,000 tons. And as I think Jerry Hendricks, retired Navy, Dr. Jerry Hendricks, has said, you know, this is in the super carrier class in terms of its size and its capabilities. Now, we have to see how they perform, but just from my perspective, I remember arriving at Pac Fleet in 2011 and 2012. I remember sitting with the commander of the Pacific Fleet at that time, Admiral Walsh.
So this is type 1, what they call type 1, type 2, type 3. All right, so type 1 is Liaoning, type 2 is Shandong, and type 3, which seems to have the electromagnetic capability that the United States has, seems to be, I think it's pronounced Fajan.
Looking at things that I can't talk about, but we were very amazed at what the Chinese were doing with their first carrier. And in the space of a decade, they produced and fielded these 3 carriers, and we're still, you know, struggling with one. And again, our carriers are better, no question. I served a lot of time on carrier.
But the thing is it's about numbers, because you can have a really high technology ship that takes a long time to build, and then it gets sunk. And then what do you do? It's about numbers. It's about numbers. The same mistake that the United States is making is the mistake that the Nazis made. The German military. Germans had better weapons, more sophisticated weapons, but because of the complexity of them, they broke down in the field. They weren't as easy to make. You couldn't make as many of them compared to, let's say, the Sherman tank versus, you know, the highest grade tanks that the Germans had near the end of the war. Same thing with the airplanes. They invented jet propulsion. The Germans invented jet propulsion, but they couldn't make enough of them. It was too complex. And you know, you knock out manufacturing capability, and the Germans lost. So it's about numbers, not complexity. So we are making the same mistake that the Germans made. We have sophisticated weaponry where it costs too much and it takes too long to get it in the field. Okay, so go back to what I was saying in the previous video. The average intelligence in the United States is 98. Now, do you understand why pulling up your pants, brushing your teeth, and stop listening to rap is really important? Because you might actually lose your country. Oh, I'm just, you know, I can do whatever I want. I'm free to do whatever I want. But those attitudes in the aggregate, when you amalgamate all those attitudes, especially in the inner city, you're bringing down the intelligence level and you're bringing down the prowess of the United States. Now, the average intelligence is 98, below average. Average is 100. The average intelligence in the United States is below average. You only have less than 20% of the population that's pulling 80% of the population. Then you add in cell phones and social media. People stop reading. They're not taking the proper supplementation. They're eating processed foods and all this stuff. And when they just think that, oh, everything's okay. Bread and circus, bread and circus, bread and circus. Do you really think that if we went toe to toe with China, that we would have a really good chance of winning? What probably will happen is that we'll win, but it will be at such a large cost that the United States will lose its economic prowess. And it's because of our leaders are stupid. It's because our leaders are on the take. And we have a society that's been plugged in to technologies that are making you stupid on purpose.
And we are still the superior force. But we have to recognize that China is growing by leaps and bounds, and they've stolen our technology. They've stolen our TTPs. We're very transparent. So, you know, a lot of our lessons learned and things that we learned in the hard way, they're going to learn the easier way. So what are they doing with this big Navy that they have? Well, obviously in the last 10 years, they've been taking territory without firing a shot, but using their Navy as kind of the premise for intimidation is what they call comprehensive national power, using the power of their economy, using the power of their wolf warrior diplomats, using the power of information warfare, and also using the presence of their military to shape the environment. They took Scarborough Shoal without firing a shot in 2012 through the use of maritime power, not with the PLA Navy predominantly, they used it with the Chinese Coast Guard.
And who was president during that time period? Oh, Obama. Now let's double check. Who was Secretary of State during that time period? Come on. When did Hillary Clinton serve for the Secretary of State? When was it? Oh, Hillary Clinton served 67th United States Secretary of State under President Obama from 2009 to 2013. He said this happened in 2012. Let me just double check. Did he say 2012?
Power of their wolf warrior diplomats, using the power of information warfare, and also using the presence of their military to shape the environment. They took Scarborough Shoal without firing a shot in 2012 through the use of maritime power, not with the PLA Navy predominantly. They used it with their Chinese Coast Guard, but they were able to acquire territory from a treaty ally.
Hillary Clinton allowed that to happen.
United States without having to fire a shot. And since 2012, since June 16, 2012, the PRCs had sovereign control over Scarborough Shoal. And so from that perspective, they've been very successful. A few months later, or in the next year, 2013, they started building 7 artificial islands in the South China Sea. Everybody, I think, is aware of these. Those are a picture of the 7 from a while ago. You can see how they're kind of configured in 2 triangles. Inside the red triangle is the kind of some of their intelligence collection capabilities that they have on the smaller reefs. But on the outside, in the yellow triangles, you'll see Fiery Cross, Subi, and Mischief Reef. And those are the reefs that are the most important because they're the ones that have the 3,000 meter or 10,000 foot runways and enough pier space to put in a couple of aircraft carriers each. And remember, at the
So it's like their Pearl
strategic
Harbor.
level, President Xi Jinping told President Obama, we're not going to militarize those. And just this last year, Admiral Aquilino at Indo-Pacific Command has said, hey, they're fully militarized. So there is just a thing we can talk about is the trustworthiness of what the Chinese tell us when they're not going to do something.
No,
They
it's
also
not
told
just
us
the
in 2018, they
trustworthiness,
told
Jim. It's not just the trustworthiness. It's the allowance by our officials, our elected officials, to allow it to happen. Now, it's either because of incompetence or because they're on the take.
as Xi Jinping told them, we won't give up 1 square inch of this territory. And there's just a kind of picture that is worth putting in your head, which is Subi Reef. And it's basically the same size as Pearl Harbor. Fiery Cross and Mischief Reef are similarly sized to Pearl Harbor. Sometimes they're even as big as the Beltway in DC. But the point is, you don't hear a lot of people talk in the media or in our academic journals and whatnot about the fact that China built 3 Pearl Harbors from 2012 to 2015 in the South China Sea. But they did. And now they basically have a military overmatch down there. And they have a vision for how they're going to use those forces on those 3 main islands. What you see is, this is from a magazine.
I want to just tell you which of these reefs are. So Subi Reef is north. So there's basically 2 triangles, a larger triangle and an inner triangle. So that upper point of the larger triangle is Subi Reef. Okay. Then on the right is Mischief Reef. And then on the left is Fiery Cross Reef. And then the inner triangle, the northern part of that is Graven Reef. On the right side, or the east, is Canaan Reef. And then the south is Johnson South Reef. And they built 6 in those 2 triangles, 6 Pearl Harbors. All right, and then there's also one in the south, just south of the Ferry Reef, and that one is the Cottrell Reef. Cottrell. Wait, Cottrell. It's amazing. It's really amazing. They're so dumb.
You know, kind of some of their intelligence collection capabilities that they have on the smaller reefs, but on the outside in the yellow triangles, you'll see Fiery Cross, Subi, and Mischief Reef. And those are the reefs that are the most important because they're the ones that have the 3,000 meter or 10,000 foot runways and enough pier space to put in a couple of aircraft carriers each. And remember, at the geostrategic level, you know, President Xi Jinping told President Obama, we're not going to militarize those. And just this last year, Admiral Aquilino at Indo-Pacific Command has said, hey, they're fully militarized. So there is just a thing we can talk about is the trustworthiness of what the Chinese tell us when they're not going to do something. They also told us in 2018, they told General Mattis, Xi Jinping told them, we won't give up 1 square inch of this territory. And there's just a kind of picture that is worth putting in your head, which is Subi Reef. And it's basically the same size as Pearl Harbor. Fiery Cross and Mischief Reef are similarly sized to Pearl Harbor. Sometimes they're even as big as the Beltway in DC. But the point is, you don't hear a lot of people talk in the media or in our academic journals and whatnot about the fact that China built 3 Pearl Harbors from 2012 to 2015 in the South China Sea. But they did. And now they basically have a military overmatch down there. And they have a vision for how they're going to use those forces on those 3 main islands. What you see is, this is from a magazine from 2006, 2008 called Naval Ship Magazine, Navy and Ship Magazine. It's a Chinese magazine, and what you see there at the top is, on the top right is the South China Sea chart with those 3 reefs, Mischief, Fiery Cross, and Subi. On the left is kind of the range rings of the platforms that would be emanating from there, the weapon systems, the HQ-9, the YJ-62, and then fighters, J-11s or J-7s. And then on the lower half, you see kind of an artist's depiction of how they would use shore-based anti-ship ballistic missiles, ship-based, and to launch at a target and blow it up. And that target you see burning there is a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier. So this is what they're telling their civilian defense industry. This is what you're doing for the motherland. They're also, in addition to the naval forces they have a strategic rocket force, and they're keen on attacking naval forces wherever they're at. And one place they know they're at is in Yokosuka Navy Base. This is from 2013. And on the left is Yokosuka Navy Base, and that's one of our aircraft carriers. I believe then was the George Washington. And on the right is out in the Gobi Desert, where the Chinese rocket force trains, and you see a mirror image of Yokosuka Navy Base, and with targets, mock targets, that are the same size as ships that we have, and they're practicing to destroy the 7th Fleet in port in Japan. Those images on the right were bulldozed by the Chinese right after this kind of 2013 timeframe, and we didn't see anything for quite a while until this year. In May timeframe here, we saw a whole bunch of new mock-ups put out there, and you can see just one picture out in Western China, and you can see naval bases and carrier targets listed out in the desert, and they're back at this very robust training program. You may have seen this in the South China Morning Post. They actually have an aircraft carrier on a rail, and they're practicing shooting at a moving target. They actually shot at a moving target in August of 2020, and you can see the closure area southeast of Hainan Island, and where there was a shot from Qinghai up in the northwest of China, and then right outside at Ningbo in eastern China, they shot a DF-21D and a DF-20.
Now this is important to pay attention to. Qinghai, however they pronounce it. So they're shooting a missile at 1,800 miles away to a target in the sea. And then Ningbo, they're shooting 1,000-mile target, 1,000 miles to hit the target. So our military thinks that it's the 1,800-mile range is the DF-26 missile, and the 1,000-mile range is, we think, the DF-21D.
Into that target closure area, and by all accounts, they hit a moving target. Now, this is the first time that any one of these anti-carrier ballistic missiles had actually been seen to actually, find a target at sea and hit it. And I think it was a signal from China to our Navy to say, we know you've been watching this. I watched the development of this missile system in 2006, 2008, when I was the Office of Naval Intelligence. But there were always skeptics around saying, well, they've never hit a moving target. And I think China very deftly sent us a signal saying, we can hit you. And so this is a kind of a confirmation of the worst fears.
So the one that came out of Ningbo, that can hold a conventional warhead of 600 kilograms. And they can also have a nuclear kit attached to it. Operational range is estimated at 1,770 kilometers, or 1,100 miles. So think about this, okay? So they're shooting in, close into their coast, right? In between the Philippines and Taiwan. All right. But if you radius that out, right, their range is way into the Pacific and way into China, and maybe even the archipelago of Alaska. Just with this.
There's a lot of work inside the Navy to figure out how do we deceive this missile system or be able to shoot it down. A couple of last slides here. In addition to these territorial issues, China is also working with the Russians. This is just a chart from this last year in December when 10 ships from the Chinese Navy and the Russian Navy operated and circumnavigated Honshu, Japan. We've seen this year Chinese Naval Air Force is actually flying together, circumnavigating Japan, and also Chinese fighters escorting Russian bombers in the Sea of Japan. So this is another aspect of this buildup that we need to consider. China is also showing the flag. They're using soft power. If you recall, in January, February this year, a volcano exploded in Tonga and spewed ash all over Tonga. And it was a very devastating natural disaster for the people of Tonga. And I won't go into what we did other than say we sent, I think, a destroyer a few days later. But what China did is they sent 2 large deck amphibs, a resupply ship and this large deck amphib, and they came and they dropped off all these pallets, all these tractors, and they've really provided a lot of support. And so, throughout my career in the Pacific, which is most of my career, the Pacific Fleet and the 7th Fleet were known for being the guys that were the first on call to get to a place when there was a hurricane or a typhoon or a natural disaster, an earthquake, and help the people of whatever country it was in the Pacific. And I'm worried about where we're at in terms of where China is and where they're advancing. We can talk about the South Pacific and what they're doing in the Solomons or Kiribati, but this is just one physical example of where they're beating us to the punch in soft power. Lastly, out in Western and Central China, in this last 8 to 10 months, China's dropped 350 ICBM silos. And we need to consider, for the last several years, the annual report.
Let's take a break, for commercial. But as you can see, this is becoming problematic. All right. And we need to really pay attention to it because this is going to ramp up. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get my honey and lemon drops. This is really important during the allergy season and during the cold season. Get a couple bags of this. What this does is it will neutralize pathogens and protect the mucosal barrier. The whole idea is that the moment you start feeling that little irritation in your throat because of the cold season or allergies, you want it get it right away so it doesn't get worse. I also have elderberry zinc lozenges in a 21 count and blueberry drops in a 100 count. So please get a couple bags of this for your household so you're ready for the cold season, because it's coming around the corner. Cold season starts around September, October. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
DoD to Congress about the PLA has always said that China's warhead count, nuclear warheads, is around 200. Well, these 350 silos filled with a DF-41 ICBM that has at least 10 MIRVs, well, that all of a sudden goes from 200 to close to 4,000 nuclear warheads. And so how does that play into an invasion of Taiwan? This is the last slide. So for about 10 years, I've been given this talk and this slide. And the point is to say that China's on a timeline. And I think people, for a long time, our China hands, our quote unquote experts on China inside academics and our government have told us that China takes a long view and they're willing to kick the can down the road. But I think China's on a timeline. They told us they're on a timeline. Xi Jinping has articulated that he's on a timeline. And he's mentioned it many different ways, but one of them is he says he wants to have the great rejuvenation of China and the great restoration of China to be a world power by 1 October 2049. He also, like his predecessor Hu Jintao and most likely Jiang Zemin, ordered the PLA to have the capability to take Taiwan starting as early as 2020. So we know we know for a fact that those orders were given by Hu Jintao and Xi Jinping. So like any good military, the PLA has been under orders from their boss to be ready to have that capability. And I know that people will debate that. I know that there's been conferences at CMSI, China Maritime Studies Institute at the War College, just recently this year talking about that. But the fact is that was the order that was given to the PLA. So the question is, how late can they use military force and still expect to have kind of this world celebration that China expects to have in 2049? I believe that China would like to acquire all this disputed territory. Obviously, Taiwan is the number one thing that they want to take. And we've seen a reflection of that here just in this last couple of weeks. But they also have disputes with India. They have disputes with Japan over the Senkakus. And they even have disputes with Russia. But for the most part, they want to be territorially whole on 1 October 2049, but they would like to use this comprehensive national power to get this territory without using force, like they were able to acquire Hong Kong and Macau without getting force. So that's been the goal, that's been the strategy. But as this decade goes on, there's going to be growing voices for the use of force. And I say the decade because I believe that if you try to, calculate when they would use force at the last possible minute, it's somewhere around 2030, which is kind of the same difference in time that went on between Tiananmen Square in 1989 and the Beijing Olympics. That's about a 20-year period when the world watched Chinese government kill their civilians by running tanks over them, and we were aghast at that. And then 20 years later, we were all beating the door down to attend the opening ceremonies of the Beijing Olympics. So if you back up 20 years from 2049, you get to about 2030. So this decade of concern between 2020, when they started to calculate how we're going to take with military force Taiwan, to 2030 is this really dangerous and concerning time period. But given everything that I've watched, I used to talk mostly about 2030, but what I'm seeing right now, the rhetoric, the actions, what they're doing, the training, this was a dress rehearsal that we saw 4 through 7 August.
2025.
And also what's happening domestically in the United States, that factors into their calculus. What's happening domestically in Japan factors into their calculus. What's happening domestically in Taiwan, politically, factors into their calculus. And also the demographic challenges that China has. They have a problem with an aging society. They have a problem with resources in terms of fuel to be able to, run their economy. They have problems with water. They have problems with food. So they had a big campaign last year to tell people to not eat so much and to clean their plates and not to take more from the buffet than they could eat. So there's a lot of concern in China about whether or not past 2030, they're going to have the resources and the wherewithal and the population to be able to achieve that great rejuvenation and restoration of territory. So I think we are in a really dangerous time right now. And as early as 2025, we could see something. And I think we need to be very cognizant of that and make our decisions based on the fact that, we just saw something that's hasn't seen in 26 years of China firing missiles at Taiwan. And when they did that in 1996, they got kind of embarrassed by the US when we sent 2 carriers there, and they had nothing to do against it. They couldn't say a thing. They just had to go back and, kind of put their tail between their legs and eat that in humiliation, but not now. So that's the end of my presentation, and over to you all.
Jim, that's
Before they do the question and answer, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamin. You should be taking this multivitamin every day. It's easy to digest. You need multivitamins as cofactors for the enzymatic activity in your cells. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this multivitamin. It's high quality. In addition, omega-3 is really important to help with cardiovascular health. They'll bring down LDL and increase HDL. They'll also help to prevent your red blood cells from sticking. Very important, especially in the aftershock of 2020. Vitamin D3, extremely important for calcium absorption, gene expression cofactor, and if your cells are infected and your cells need to go into apoptosis, D3 helps for that to happen, so you're clearing an infection. Ashwagandha root, really important to control your blood glucose levels. It'll also bring down the inflammatory response in your vascular system. Turmeric, it's an antioxidant and brings down inflammation. It'll help to boost up your immune system. It's really important. It'll also, if you take it right before a workout, it'll help you to recover from that workout. Clarity factor gets rid of that brain fog, so you're not stupid. All right. So it's really important. If you need to concentrate at work, school, or you're just trying to improve your neural health, take Clarity Factor every day. It'll keep those dendritic connections. Your neurons are going to be firing those neurotransmitters, and this is synergistic with C60 because C60 helps to boost up your mitochondrial health, and you need good mitochondrial health for neural health. So take Clarity Factor. This is going to maintain and improve your concentration and your memory. Take this every day. And like I said, it's synergistic with C60. C60 is a strong antioxidant. You can get it either in avocado oil, MCT coconut oil, or extra virgin olive oil. I have it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. You take a teaspoon of it a day, and what you take it on an empty stomach for better absorption. And what that will do is it'll soak up those free radicals in your cells and and reduce the cellular stress in those cells and in that tissue. And over time, what you'll notice is that the cells and the tissue are healthier, and your mitochondria is healthier. And so you'll have more energy. And you need energy for your immune system and for proper cellular processes and tissue performance. So you'll notice that not only are you aging slower, but your tissues are getting healthier and you're getting more energy. So take it either in the extra virgin olive oil, the avocado oil, or the MCT coconut oil. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's a synergistic with many of the products that I offer, especially the Clarity Factor and resveratrol. Why is that important? Because of the boosting of the health of the mitochondria.
sobering presentation. It's exceptionally well done. We've got a lot of comments and questions in the chat window. I want to get to a couple of those to kind of kick off the conversation. One of the questions was from Phineas Dagenbach. What are the strategic steps the U.S. can take to stop and reverse the continued rise in confidence in the Chinese military? How can we prevent China from achieving true competitive status with the U.S.?
Yeah, that's kind of the.
Dr. Paul Cottrell,
$64,000
how would you
question.
answer that? Dr. Paul Cottrell, how would you answer that question? Stop the FDI in China, move American manufacturing out of China and into other low-cost regions, bring it back to America to help American workers, and start demonizing the hedge fund managers and sending money into China. That's where it starts. Then you start spending a lot more money on building ships. It is unacceptable that we only have about, I think it was 7 shipyards, while China has 19. Well, not only should we be building ships, we should be building shipyards. Metal manufacturing in the United States needs to be bolstered up. We need to put ourselves on a war footing in terms of manufacturing. It starts there. Stop giving money to China. Start building up our manufacturing base in the United States. Increase the number of shipyards. Increase the number of ships that we're building. And start demonizing the things that are making our kids stupid, like social media and processed foods. And you need to start putting into the psyche of the American kid, God, country, and family. That's where you start.
To deter them from acting. And I think right now, we have to take a whole of government approach.
And then lastly, you just keep on having your aircraft carriers going up and down the Chinese Strait between China and Taiwan. You just keep on doing it. And you start waving to the Chinese. Just keep on waving. You have to project power in these regions that they're creating these bubbles of influence and these bubbles of military projection.
I think the previous administration was the first U.S. administration, regardless of party, to really recognize that we had a strategic competitor and that we had to do something about it. And so I think confronting China across all the domains, diplomacy, information, economic, why is it that our major hedge fund managers are investing trillions of dollars in China? Why is that? Because we know that some percentage of that money goes to build up the PLA, the rocket forces, the naval forces, the air forces, all designed to kill and be used to kill American service members. Why would we continue to do that? So if we started to choke off their money, that's going to get their attention, and it's going to cause them to worry, because if the economy goes down in China, now they not only have to worry about not having money to fund the military, they have to worry about what do their people do if they're making stuff that nobody buys. And so they're going
to have civil unrest. They're going to have civil unrest. The only reason why they've been able to get to this point was because we funded it and we gave them stability. Now it's time to pull the rug out and start pushing back. But we have, a problem with our kids today, and that is lack of discipline, lack of family, lack of country, lack of religion. They're out of shape. They're woke. You really think that the next generation of kids can fight a war like what my grandfather did in World War II? Of course not. Because of TikTok and Facebook and X and all the other social media that dumb them down. They can't even read. The average American kid has lower than average intelligence.
For Westerners here in Europe and other places, that we will be more willing to knuckle under and say, well, we can't afford that. If you remember the tariffs during the previous administration, there was a lot of concern. Well, the farmers won't accept this. They ended up accepting it. They got some reimbursement from the government. But the point is, if we're really serious about this question and getting to it, we're gonna have to choke off the money. Then we're gonna have to increase our presence. I know there's a big debate going on in Washington over presence. I know guys like Bob Work and others are saying we can't be forward deployed. I'm a believer in forward deployment. I think we need to be there. If I was a king for a day, which I never would be, but if I was, I'd be thinking about sending the Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group through the Taiwan Strait. We haven't sent a Carrier Strike Group through the Taiwan Strait since 2007. That's
2007. 2007. That is insane. So it was near the very tail end of the Bush administration, Bush Jr., and all the way through the Obama administration, all the way through the Trump administration, and all the way through the Biden administration. Why? I thought Trump was a tough guy. Sometimes you have to project power. And you know what? I'm voting for Trump, but there's some things that he does that are really stupid.
You don't use it, you lose it. That's why we do FONOPs. We do the freedom of navigation operations, not because we're trying to say that we're going to military defeat the Chinese, but what we're trying to build is an international consensus, a coalition that says those excessive straight baseline claims are invalid, and we're challenging them so that they can never come in. If China were able to ever say that the United States didn't challenge one of those disputed territories in the South China Sea, they'd be the first ones to march into the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague and put forward a case saying, hey, legally these are ours, no one challenges them. Even though they said in 2016, then that case went to trial and concluded, they called it a farce. They'll turn around the very next day and say, oh, well, we want to use this court to validate our claims. That's called legal warfare, lawfare. And they will use the law to steal territory from people. And it may not matter to some Americans in Middle America, but it doesn't matter to us because $5 trillion worth of goods and services.
It's a bigger issue, Jim Fanel. It's a bigger issue because if the Chinese gain economic and military power, they're going to be a model that is going to be copied by Western countries. That means that our constitutional republic is going to be reconfigured, and you can see this easily happening if you have socialism and communism starting to take hold in our politics. All right, as our nation starts to weaken, they're going to look up to China to try to model what is, quote, successful in their contemporary eyes. And they're going to try to model a one-party government that is top down with the erosion of our constitutional freedoms. That's where this is heading if we lose. Because case in point, that's exactly what was happening during the early 1900s. There were 3 countries in the West that were trying to model communism. That is what's at stake here.
And America stands up for the values of small nations, not just big, powerful nations. So frequently you'll hear Chinese foreign ministry types talk about, well, we're a big country and you small countries need to do what we say. They're doing that right now with Lithuania.
Jim, I want to get to a couple more questions from the audience, but I want to pose a question or just bring this line of thinking up, because when you and I worked together in the Pacific, you were at Pacific Fleet and I was working in the China division at the PACOM Joint Intelligence Operations Center. And there was a lot, we were focusing, our teams were focusing very much on the capabilities that the Chinese were building, what we now term A2AD, anti-access area denial capabilities, which were the capabilities to keep the US and other outside parties, Japan, Australia, et cetera, from coming to the rescue of Taiwan. And then they also had capabilities specifically designed to take down the Taiwan military itself, right? So back to that previous question about what can the U.S. do in terms of military capabilities, in terms of looking at Chinese strengths and weaknesses and our strengths and weaknesses. What are the things that the U.S. ought to be focused on in terms of our military investment now to limit to the extent that we can China's advantages and also to wreak havoc with their greatest weaknesses, if you will?
Yeah,
Thank you for asking that question, Bill. Dr. Paul Cottrell thinks that we need to heavily arm our coalition of the willing, South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Taiwan, invest in our military, especially the Navy, use advanced technologies like drone warfare and social learning of the drones to be able to attack these ships that are coming out of China. And it's not to mitigate or to slow down the projection of the Chinese with their blue water navy. It is to push them back. See, the premise of the question is wrong. It's not to check them. It's to push them back as a brown water navy. That's the answer.
great question, Bill. Number one in my book is, as us being Navy types, is we have to get back to saying we are a Navy that's designed purposefully and solely right now to sink other navies, and specifically the Chinese Navy.
That's right.
And so what you have in the PLA Navy is a programmatic, 20-year programmatic effort to put anti-ship cruise missiles on all their platforms, all their major surface combatants, their aircraft, their submarines, and from shore base. And it's a very capable program. And they really, it's canisterized, it's interchangeable amongst different platforms. And we haven't done that. We have approached a piecemeal approach. It was in special, compartmented stuff years ago, and it's just never really gelled into a kind of a number one Navy priority. Even though we've had Pacific Fleet commanders, I know for 15 years, that said it was their number one concern, having just these short-range subsonic harpoon missiles, and then those are almost going to get phased out. There's a big hue and cry about that. So we need to get back to the idea that, when you and I joined the Navy, we were facing the Soviet Navy, and that's what we thought about. That's what we planned to. How do we sink the Soviet Navy? And we need to have a Navy that says, how do we sink the Chinese Navy? And unfortunately, what's happened over the last 30 years of fighting in the desert is that we've got now a Navy that says, well, we have to be able to do everything. And because of that, we're now unable to do anything when it comes to dealing with the PLA Navy. So we have to have the capability, top to bottom, to be able to destroy and sink the PLA Navy. Because without the PLA Navy, they're never going to be able to fully take Taiwan. They may be able to bomb a lot of it with their ballistic missiles, but they won't be able to get the boots on the ground in sufficient numbers to be able to take that territory. And then if they did take the territory, we could have a discussion about what are the implications of Taiwan falling into the PRC's hands. We can just say, for the agreement's sake, right now, it's a long argument, but it's not good for America's national security.
Right.
And it's certainly not good for Taiwan or Japan or Korea or Australia or anybody else that's a friend of ours. So we don't want that to happen. So if we don't want that to happen, we have to be able to destroy the PLA Navy Air Forces, other Air Forces that come out. We have to be able to put them down. We can even talk about striking the mainland, but from my perspective, what's the number one thing is we need to get all hands on deck saying that sinking the Chinese Navy is the sole purpose of the U.S. Navy today. And I know that people from the Mideast group will get upset about that. But until we can put that down and say, you guys, you got everything for 30 years, that's done now. We are getting on with the main task of defending America. And we have to be able to put the PLA Navy down at Davy Jones' locker. If we can't do that, we may not have a Navy in 50 years.
Forget about 50 years. It could happen in 10. please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C. This helps with your skin and your immune system. Take it every day. If you're not feeling well due to a cold, please take a double dose of it. Probiotics are really important. I have it in a powdered form or a veggie cap form. This will help with your gut biome. It will ease inflammation in your GI tract. In addition, it will help to improve metabolism and energy absorption and the communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. A lot of people don't realize that a good gut biome, it will also improve your skin and improve your mental acuity and your mood. Depression can be associated with a poor gut biome. So it's just overall beneficial to make sure that you stop eating processed foods, stop eating fast food, eat properly, filter your water, and take a good probiotic. So please go to my store, get the powdered version or the veggie cap version. Olive leaf extract is a new product that I have on my store. You should be taking this every day. This is a dual product. This will help with your cardiovascular system and help to improve your immune system. How? Well, for the cardiovascular system, olive leaf extract will bring down LDL and help raise up your HDL levels. In addition, it brings down inflammation. So it's slowing down and reducing the inflammation in your vascular system and in your other tissues. So that's going to help boost up your immune system, and that's going to help to reduce cardiovascular disease. So please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. Resveratrol is an antioxidant. It also helps to get rid of senescent cells. It's synergistic with C60. So please take resveratrol every day. I take it every day. It's really important. Good night formula. As we're learning that China is going to take over the Pacific Ocean, and our Navy fleet is run by a bunch of politicians that are dingbats, you may not be able to sleep. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night formula. This has melatonin and tryptophan in it. You need good sleep. Why? So you have more energy when you wake up. You are detoxifying your body because you need good sleep, deep sleep and REM cycle sleep to be able to detoxify the cells and your nervous system. If you have chronic sleep deprivation, you're going to build up toxins in your cells and you're going to age faster. In addition, you need REM cycle sleep to be able to consolidate memory. So your memory will decline if you have sleep deprivation. So it's really important to get the Good Night formula. If you're not sleeping well, take this every day. It has tryptophan and melatonin in it if you're not sleeping well. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Magnesium and zinc, very important to boost up your immune system. If you're not feeling well because of the cold season or some sort of allergy, you know what? Take a double dose of it.
A little bit of a spoiler alert for the coming September issue of Proceedings, which is naval aviation focused. We got an article by a naval aviator who says, "Stop sending carriers to CENTCOM." That's the title of it. Basically saying, hey, look, we've got we've got our hands full in the Pacific with China, and we've got other forces that can manage the smaller problem in the Middle East. But for China, we've got to keep our carriers, and we got to keep our most capable platforms in the Pacific and focused on the China problem. Austin Roberto, one of our frequent listeners and commentators, he brought up two things. First is he touched on your demographic timeline. You mentioned that there's a lot more 80-year-olds than 20-year-olds in China in 2035, and then you also had a comment earlier about as the Chinese economy slows down, how will that impact? I think that both those factors, in my view, play into your period of concern right now. But your thoughts on those two things?
Right. I think demographics are something that
It's problematic, and that's why they're going to speed up the timeline to invade Taiwan. In addition, artificial intelligence and drone warfare is going to be a major advancement in this next conflict in the world. So how many people do you really need? Don't know.
We don't talk about a lot. I think we talk about them more today than we did ever. But the idea that China is going to be an aging society, and Japan's an aging society. A lot of different places in Europe are aging societies, but they're also wealthy societies. And so what China's been trying to do is to make China a wealthy society before it becomes an aging society. And there's a big debate in academic circles about whether or not China will become an aging society first and then try to continue to still make it a wealthy society. And maybe the jury's still on that. But that's why it's important for us to have a credible military deterrent, because if we can delay their decision-making process, they use, we talked about comprehensive national power. They also use a thing called scientific development inside CNP, which is they Rubik's Cube everything, they war game everything, they're always constantly analyzing. There's like 98 million party members, and they're always looking at, well, if I do something in the economic arena, what will this do in the information or legal arena or in the military arena or vice versa? And they'll calculate all that out. And I think one of the things they haven't really calculated is, because we had basically a 50-year policy of, engagement with China. Former Secretary of State Pompeo called it blind engagement. Before I heard him ever use that, I was using the phrase, we had unconstrained and unaccountable engagement with China. And so China knew that for whatever reason, the United States was more interested in engaging than in confronting them. Well, if we were to come in and start to really do things that show them that we're confronting them, they're going to have to go back to their drawing board and recalculate, well, what happens if things don't happen the way we think it is? Are we prepared? And so we need as much doubt and much confusion that we can introduce into the thought process. We should do that. So focusing on the aging society, writing articles about it, telling them, hey, you're going to be too old to do this. Your young people aren't going to want to risk their lives. They're a one-child system, even though they've opened it up now. It's not changing, basically. People are still having one child, maybe two in some areas, but it's largely one child. They're a one-child government now. Most of the people in government, maybe not at the very top, but the rank and file, they're all coming from one-party backgrounds and experiences. And so if we can feed into that and play a little information warfare on their minds, maybe they'll reconsider. That's all part of it. It's not just any one thing. And then obviously, there was age, and what was the other?
Just their economy, as their economy.
Yeah, in their economy, I just read something today that says that Chinese economy is contracting, and it's also in a recession. So this is another area why would we pump them up with our own money from our own markets in our investment funds into China when they're struggling to try to get dollars? Let's not feed them. Let's try to make their economy go south and then see how the party survives, because we're told by the experts, and I believe it, the number one goal of the Chinese Communist Party is to stay in power. And they've been able to stay in power for quite a long time now, because they've been able to come through and say, I've made your life better. If you go to China, maybe pre-COVID, but if you went to China anywhere between 2000 and 2015, China's a pretty modern place in many areas. They still have a lot of poverty in many other areas, but in the big cities, Beijing, Shanghai, these other places, they had modernity, and they were starting to make a change to that. And if that goes south, and those people that had apartments, had cars, had whatever it is that they like, that starts going away, they're not going to be happy, and they're going to take it out on somebody. At least that's the hope. Now, I'm not saying regime change. I'm just saying put the pressure on and make the party have to earn their pay.
Yeah, great point. We got a question from GKD. How is the U.S. Navy supposed to match the shipbuilding and modernization rate of the PLA Navy with the commercial/military shipbuilding industry that has significantly shrunk since the end of World War II?
Yeah, that's the question.
You have to start, first of all, scaring the hedge funds that they're going to get heavily taxed if they don't invest in the United States. Two, you have to give incentive and reduce regulation to improve our manufacturing base and build more shipyards to employ more people. It's a win-win. Because if we start losing ships and they get sunk in the Pacific, it's going to take a long time to get them back, with new vessels that can be commissioned into the fleet, if ever. So we are weak in this regard. But we've had this happen in prior military history in the United States, where we gutted our military and we were in a problem, and then we ramped back up. The difference is that one, the weapons that need to be made are more sophisticated, and there's other industries that have to be bolstered up, and that is the steel industry. It's not just shipyards, it's electronics and steel. We need to invest in America, and we need to have people thinking. Get off of TikTok. We need a nation that is galvanized to win. To win. This a lesson learned from JFK during NASA's program, and NASA was dragging its feet, and Kennedy kept on, saying, "What's the progress?" And they were saying, "Well, maybe we'll never get there, or the Russians might get there first, or whatever." And he said, and it's prophetic. He said, "There is no reward for second place." This is the same problem. We have to galvanize our youth into a direction of service to country, and our manufacturing base into service for country, and the ones that are investing into service to country.
This naval shipbuilding, and it's just a painful to read those words on the screen, because it just, from my perspective, as you and I talked, I mean, some of us been trying to warn about this for a long time, and navies are not something you can just flip a light switch and say, "Oh, okay, tomorrow we'll have 15 carriers." It's just not going to happen. And so we have to be Americans. We have to be innovative and creative. And so we're going to have to go back and say, well, what about ships and mothballs? We had the U.S. Navy, love the institution, it's my home, but we have people that said, well, we're never going to go back to the mothball fleet. We're not going to do that. It's too much, costs too much, not enough people. And there's a lot of truth to all those things. But if we're going to get in a dogfight with the Chinese Navy, then we're going to have to do something different. And we just can't throw up our hands and say, Bohica, it's over, and that's it. We can't do that. So we're going to have to come up with new, innovative ways to put platforms at sea that have weapons that can sink their fleet. And there's a lot of recommendations that are coming forward. Guys like Jerry Hendricks, I've mentioned before, he's got a lot of great ideas. Right, Sadler, there's a lot of people that are putting forward ideas. But all those little niches aside, again, king for a day, first thing I do is I'd announce a nationwide Navy shipbuilding restoration program. We need somebody like a John Stennis. We need somebody that's going to come in and tell the American people, bipartisan, get out of partisanship, that get into national defense and say it's in our national defense to be able to have the capacity to build a fleet, and we need to do it now, and we need to prioritize that. But when I watch the news every day, I see a lot of other priorities being listed.
Great point. Jim, we are about out of time here, and I think we could go on for quite a while. Lots of people asking questions.
All right. I think that was very informative. This is going to be an ongoing saga. We're going to be learning a lot of stuff. I'm going to do another video that goes a little bit deeper into some of these things. But please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. It's really important for cellular metabolism and to boost up your mitochondria. That way you have more energy. And lignans, very important to take every day. It's a powder. You mix it with food or with water. It also helps with hormonal health. It's for males and females. A lot of people don't understand that our endocrine system has been disrupted because of the food that we eat and the water we drink. You need to break that cycle by stop eating processed foods, stop eating fast foods, even restaurant food that's like mid-grade. You should stop eating that. Filter your water. I use a 0 water filtration system. It's a 5 filter system. That way you're getting rid of microplastics, you're getting rid of PFAS, and I'll do another video on how to detoxify PFAS. It's possible, but it takes a while. And all these things that are in our air, our water, and our food supply, it is disrupting our endocrine system. And that's the reason why you have less energy, you may have less libido, you have memory issues, you have thyroid issues, you have, kidney issues and blood pressure issues and cortisol level issues. So there's lots of things, pancreatic issues. So there's lots of things that happen that can disrupt this endocrine system and exocrine system. So it's really important to boost up your immune system, eat properly, filter your water, and take proper supplementation. And one of these supplements that's really important to prevent endocrine disruption and to boost up your immune system is lignans. You should be taking it every day. Cancer incidences have gone up since 2020 crisis. And you need to boost up your immune system and help your endocrine system. It's really important. This is a lot of people don't realize how important supplements like lignans are in this post 2020 era. So please take my advice and get healthy. With that said, thank you for listening. Please share the links. Please follow me on X or on GETTR. You can also follow me on Facebook. I also have a podcast publication on Podomatic and Apple Podcasts. So links are in the description of this video. So please follow me there and share the links. Ask your social media to follow me. It's important because we are going through another cycle where it is going to put us under stress, and it's going to potentially reduce our civil liberties. And we need to be engaged. We need to be that next generation that is the greatest generation. We are by far not that right now, but that doesn't mean that we can't rise to the occasion and make it happen. So please follow my work. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com, the website, and follow me on the 4 channels on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.